Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to the event, which is going to help launch WWF's concept paper on a vision for just energy transformation worldwide and the impact on ambition. We've got a very distinguished panel with us today. Just to say, first of all, as the moderator, I'm Jim Skee. I'm based at Imperial College London, but I'm bought out entirely to be co-chair of IPCC Working Group 3 at the moment, about which I cannot speak because it's in draft at a delicate stage. And I'm also chairing Scotland's Just Transition Commission, which I think is my qualification for actually being here. Now, so we are going to get a brief presentation of the report from Manuel Pulgar Vidal, who's the global leader for climate and energy at WWF. Then we have a distinguished panel that will give us commentary. We've got Francis O'Grady, General Secretary of the TUC here in the UK. We have Sanjay Vashist, who is the Director of Cannes International for South Asia. And finally, we've got Sean de Klena from the World Economic Forum, who will give their commentary on the report. So since we have a limited amount of time, I would suggest we just get straight into it, Manuel.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you to you all for being part of this important event, because it is about the report, and it is to talk about energy transformation with this just concept addition, that for us it is so important. And let me start by saying that this is not just to connect dots in between just transition and energy transformation. It is to strongly integrate concepts as a way in which we can address that desired transformation. So let's start by thinking on that. And for sure I will talk a bit about the just transition concept, that for sure it is important, but to then share with you what we are suggesting in this report. Let me start with the energy transformation concept. We know, because science has already told us, and more concretely in the 1.5 special report, what does it mean, the energy transformation, and how much it costs, and what is the level of effort that we must put to promote that transformation. And it's interesting that at least in that topic, the IPCC is saying that cost is going to be trillions. And it is important to recognize that when we think about the 100 billion, despite of the good political signal that could bring to the world, because it is a political signal, that amount is peanuts. And it is important to recognize that. Also, the IPCC is saying that it will be extremely costly to walk that transition or that transformation. But on the other hand, the benefits will be more than the cost of not acting. And that is also an important concept to be raised when we think about the energy transformation. And also, what the IPCC report told us, it is that it must be related to this number that I think it was the 45%. That was really important. And also let me connect that number with what the IEA told us some months ago, that by 2050, 95% of the energy source could come or must come from by renewable, non-conventional energy. So mostly wind and solar. So that is the reality of the energy transformation. And we know that is an irreversible and unstoppable process. It is currently happening. That for sure needs a lot of things to be addressed by the world. One of those, it is probably the lack of energy cooperation and a misunderstanding on what does it mean, the concept of energy security. It's interesting what it is happening in the world, even in Europe. When we think about energy security, which more simple definition, it is the most affordable source of energy for a functioning economy, immediately we can react that there is not any climate consideration in that concept. And the lack of cooperation, what it is producing, it is that every country it is still trying or to exploit their own source or to see the most affordable, closest source of energy without any cooperation. And that is happening in Germany with lignite, and that is happening also in Germany with this pipeline to bring gas from Russia, because nobody is cooperating, and it is exactly the same in Latin America. I am Peruvian, and we know how much in northern South America people is continue exploiting and thinking that the fossil fuels are something that we should continue extracting even for the future, because this lack of energy cooperation, it is something that we must address in the more effective possible way. So that transformation of the energy sector, for sure, it is important, it is unstoppable, but still it is facing many challenges that we must address as a way to keep this and to move it forward. But let me keep in the parking lot a bit the energy transformation to say something that it is important for this report. Because a just energy transformation could happen just if we are only able to align a collective vision. And that is, for me, extremely important. And let me say, probably in a too optimistic, no, I am optimistic by nature, but let me say something that probably we haven't yet appreciated well, that it is that in some way the world has already agreed the collective vision. It is an undoubtedly collective vision. Nobody is doubting of the 1.5. It is interesting, everybody knows that despite the Paris Agreement didn't mention the 1.5 because it was well below 2 degrees, it has been through the science that finally the world has agreed that it must be 1.5, and that phrase of the IPCC, every half degrees matters, really was a fantastic one. I think that really pushed the world to understand what it could mean to go over the 1.5. So nobody is doubting of the 1.5, and everybody is moving their actions into that. Even today, now I'm not sure if I must be happy or worried that every day I am looking new numbers. So the USCCC told us some days ago that with the current NDCs, we could raise temperature to 2.7, but some organizations are saying 2.4. Today I read 2.1 and somebody is saying 1.9. So let's see what is the real number. But the point is that we are in the right direction, but with not enough actions. But nobody's doubting of that vision. But secondly, nobody's doubting of the net zero, and that is an important thing. Because the net zero by 2050, and resilient world for sure, by 2050, it is also key when we think about a just energy transformation. And for sure, we do need to still give more and strong content. That is our friend from Irina. So very timing goes through of Francesco. So what we do know, it is that the net zero concept still needs to be filled with a strong definition, with a clear standard. It has been really good to see SBTi releasing their net zero standard within value chain, with clarity on what are the obligations for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, because that is the way in which we will force that transformation. So it is not for now to talk about beyond value chain and to talk about some alternative. No, it is real reduction within the value chain with a clear and trustable net zero standard. And I hope that we can continue to strengthen that standard. And also it is about to see what role it could be played by nature when we think about on the energy transformation. I will take 3 more minutes, is okay? And we know that to get to that, we do need to halve emissions by 2030. So it is important that we have the collective vision, that we know how the energy transformation, it is an unstoppable process. But what we do need to manage, it is also the consequences of that desired transformation. And that is why I told you that I will bring back the just transition concept. And I am going to share to you my personal definition of just transition. For me, just transition, it is a set of implemented actions or implementing actions, plant-based, to address the potential negative impacts of a desired change. That is just transition. So we know that we want to transform the energy sector. We know that that will have negative, positive for sure, but also negative consequences. And the point it is, what are that set of planned actions that could help us to address those negative impacts? And that is key, because when we think about that energy transformation, we are talking about many potential negative impacts, that it is not just related to jobs. For sure, jobs, it is one of those, or development. It could be also related to nature, to biodiversity, not because of the closure of some facilities, but because of the land that we will need to install the new facilities for wind or for solar. So that is why in our report we are addressing three main topics. The first one, it is how to support economic, or how to define economic and social policies, because it is about also policies. It is about structure. It is how can we should organize our internal, our own governance body to address the energy transformation in a just way. It is about protection and enhancement of biodiversity, and for sure about international cooperation. So this report is showing, it is defining ways to address the energy transformation in a just way, and I hope that can contribute strongly to this desired change. So thank you, Jim, and sorry if I have taken too much time. Thank you very much.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. There's a lot in the report to actually cover. I think it's worthwhile emphasising that when we talk about just transition, sometimes we see the word transition underlined, and sometimes we see the word just underlined, as my colleagues in the Scottish Trades Union Congress reminded me constantly on the Just Transition Commission. So, Frances, I think that's your lead.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. And just to say thank you so much for the invitation to share a platform, a WWF platform, and to see trade unionism as part of that. That's important to us. Because, of course, the language of just transition has a very specific origin. It was something that the global trade union movement, and including the TUC, fought hard, very hard, to get included at Paris. And it was about workers. It was about workers and workers' unions having a voice in the change that was to come. And basically saying, you know, very often, as we saw with the financial crash and elsewhere, it's workers who end up paying the price. This time, we want a just transition that puts decent work and workers' voice at the heart of it. So it has a very specific root that I think is important, because when we think about, for example, countries like Chile, many other countries in the world where the unions there feel they have not yet got the strength of voice that they want to see. They have not yet got those seats at the table to be able to have a voice in their own futures. And the reason this is important, I'm going to say something personal to me, is that I have seen so many unjust transitions. People may know there was a major pit closure program here in Britain in the 1980s. My brother was a miner. I can tell you when they went on strike, and by the way, although history has been a bit rewritten by some in government since, this was not about protecting the planet. Back then in '84, this was about destroying people's livelihoods and breaking a union, is the truth. And the result of those pit closures were that people like my brother went from job to job, redundancy to redundancy, insecure contract to insecure contract, on lower pay, without the means to bring up a family in a decent way. That's why, for me, this feels personal and it matters. We can do it differently. The TUC and indeed the ILO have set out very clear principles for what a just transition should mean. That does include absolutely having that collective vision, that clarity about what the industrial strategy is. But critically, it means decent jobs being at the heart of that. And again, that isn't just a woolly slogan. We know the difference between a decent job and one that isn't. You know, one that you can raise a family on, that pays well, and that gives unions and workers an independent democratic voice at work and in society. It is about security. It is about industrial strategy. It is about what happens when one job goes in one part of the country and the only equivalent jobs are somewhere, you know, sadly, the labour market doesn't always work in that way where, one job goes and another job opens in the same neighbourhood. In our experience, that's not what happens, and it's why people worry so much and are so protective of the jobs they have. Now, we can give people security. We can give them guarantees on decent skills and retraining and support to get the new jobs. We can invest properly so that companies diversify. So maybe they take some of the shoulder of responsibility for the risk of making the change, and that risk doesn't always fall on the shoulders of individual working families. But critically for us, and I'll end with this, it is about having a genuine voice, not being relegated to being a spectator, but having a seat at the table, because as we've seen in the UK and around the world, workers have ingenious ideas about how to transform to net zero, nobody knows their companies and their industries better than workers and unions themselves, and we want to see that change. For me, an awful lot of the imaginative, creative, exciting proposals are coming from workers and unions about how to clean up their industries, protect their livelihoods, and give their children a real green and fair and just future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Francis. And just to make an observation that, in terms of unjust transitions, it was very obvious in the work we were doing, the results of that can be there decades later in terms of scarring on communities. So it's why it's so important, I think, to address it. But I wonder, Sanjay, if we could turn to you. And just to say, I've enjoyed many interesting conversations with your colleague Stefan Singer about the scope of what just transition might mean. So I'm looking forward very much to what you have to say.
Sure. I will be happy to share one perspective which I think is must if we talk about just transition. Energy transition will happen. Certainly it is on the doorsteps, we all know that. The earlier energy transition used to be when our great-grandfathers, maybe 1800s, when we shifted from wood to coal and now moving towards solar and wind. So at that point of time, climate change or environmental issues were not there. So it was smooth, less known, it happened. And I do give a lot of credit to industries to basically facilitate that transition. But now, I think when we are at the doorsteps of our energy transition is at doorsteps, I think we have to make sure all the ills, all the shortcomings of earlier energy system need to be overcome. Having said that, of course, success of solar and wind, which is now affordable, predictable, sustainable, or replicable also, we have seen that. But when we speak about energy transition, I normally hear feed-in tariff. Decentralized energy system in urban areas, there should be feed-in tariff so that when people are not at home, they can earn money, all that. So that could be a kind of incentives. Cost of energy to consumers should be less. Of course, we need that. That has a direct implication on the products, industries also, the product that they deliver. We also hear about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles in India now, our government is talking about ethanol for flex engines, and basically they have in mind that electric vehicles or a transition should happen. We have to move away from diesel and petrol. We heard about skills to workers. Decent jobs, Francis just now mentioned about decent jobs. We heard about utilization of infrastructure with energy companies. Whatever infrastructure they have in terms of land, factories, how that will be utilized when the transition will happen, when the change will happen. And we also hear about incentives like tax discounts and all that to companies. And if you see, all these are for rich and influencers. And that's my worry. if we really are looking at just energy transition, there's going to be a very big constituency of poor people who live in the vicinity of, for example, coal mines. What happens to them? And can South Asia, can Southeast Asia, can International, we are together working in these areas to basically be the voice of these communities. Of course, what will happen to the communities? These are the communities which have no land, because land has been acquired with the support from government by companies 60, 70 years back, so that they can mine the coal areas, coal from the land. They don't have any rights also. In other places, they have forest rights, but they don't have rights on that land because it has been acquired. It was acquired maybe by when the earlier generation was there. The new generation even doesn't know how to do agriculture if even today we give them the land back. They don't have voice. It's the authorities, government authorities and influencers and companies who take a call for them. They don't have voice, and that's my worry. That would be a biggest hurdle in justice element of energy transition. Local economy will be gone. Just picture this. When the minings will be closed, all those people who have come here to do the mining, they will go away, they will be transferred somewhere else, they will be accommodated, they will get decent jobs, their skills will be renewed, everything will happen. But the economy, local economy that will shrink for those informal people, informal workers, they will get into a poverty trap. So certainly we are going to compromise Sustainable Development Goal 1. They will certainly, they have to migrate, they will go into a debt trap, and I think we have to anticipate these possible threats to the communities, especially these communities are also same who are facing vulnerability to the climate extremes. So they're totally dependent. These are people who basically sell milk to the staff of a company. These are people who repair, who basically provide, who is a driver to a vendor, and that vendor provides transport of coal from one place to another. So I think we have to anticipate that also. Certainly from the sympathy or empathy perspective, we can talk about they will be pushed into poverty, they'll be into debt trap, they'll be forced to migrate, they'll be exploited, vulnerable also. But let me speak a language which rich will understand, and that is they will get into crime. Are we ready to face that kind of crime? Because they will not have any job, what to do? They'll be desperate. They will go into a deforestation, which will have a negative impact on the climate goals. And they will go into illegal mining. Even the company will close the mining. You cannot stop them. They will go, they will dig out 20 kg per day and they'll go and sell it into a grey market, which they do now also, but they don't enter the mining areas. They just, the spillage that happens from the truck transport, they collect it and sell it in the market. So when we speak about just transition, certainly one principle is leave no one behind. That's the must. Second, prioritize most vulnerable, and these are vulnerable already. Normally who work on disaster risk reduction, I think you all know, when we calculate vulnerability, we also look at how much access to the resources is. So if you have less access to resources, then you are more vulnerable, even if you are affected by a disaster once in a year. If you have high resources and you are being hit by disasters again and again, you are still resilient. That's how it is calculated. Social schemes, the existing social schemes are with assumption that you basically, you are going to work with mining around you, and that's how the social schemes are provided. Now the complete economy will change. Social schemes need to be adjusted, need to be revisited, and then also they should be the partner in preparing that. They should have a social representation when the decisions are being taken for them. Just transition and what it will contribute to the ambition. One, of course, sustainable development goals combining with energy transition, government will be interested to increase more ambition. They'll be happy to do that because by one effort, they are achieving two objectives. Second, with role of existing energy producers, we will create them as allies. We would know you can shift to keep your crown of energy producer. We don't want it that we don't want to dethrone you. Keep your crown as long as you provide us energy transition which is just for everybody, workers, for communities who has been dependent on you. That's what you need to do. And of course, established system will enhance confidence of investors also, that yes, this is going to stay, and there is a very strong element of sustainability. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanjay. Now, I'm going to turn to Sean from the World Economic Forum at the moment, and I think what Sean can help us with is some of the ideas about financing the transition, I hope. And I know your background is in the food sector, and frankly, I think food and agriculture is a huge challenge in terms of just transition as well. So any echoes you have there would be good.
We could have a whole conversation on land use, but we won't do that. But no, you're right. I think, I mean, it's been laid out really nicely, the framework around why we need a just transition. I mean, what is it that we know at the moment? We know that coal, I mean, let's put it out there, coal is 25% of greenhouse gases. It's 75% of the electricity that we, emissions per se. But at the same time, most of that coal is being developed in developing markets, in developing economies. And so what we also know at the moment is that on average over the last 10 years, less than 5% of the money that has gone, the investment that's gone into energy transition has gone to developing countries. And so we know that if we're going to shift from coal to renewables, and if we're going to do that in a way that's just, and we live up to the urgency of which this is needed. This is not a 20, 30, 50 year sort of gradual transition. This is something we need to be dealing with now. So there's a just and an urgent quality to this. Then financing is going to be key. But it's not just about making a series of deals. This is about getting the right kind of financing in to bring the principles of a just energy transition right to the fore. And so actually we've been working as a cross-sector group recently to build out that set of principles. So the duet principles, the just, urgent economic transition principles for ensuring that finance really is done in a way that responds to the needs of that. And so what you're seeing is this is a group of banks that are coming together. So you have HSBC, you have Prudential, you have, sorry, I'm just making sure I don't miss anyone because there was, but Sumitomo Mitsui and the PIDGE, the Private Infrastructure Development Group, the International Trade Union Confederation, and of course the WWF, coming together with the World Economic Forum to say, right, can we build out this set of transitions that support countries, that put at the heart of those principles support for national plans. This has to be done with countries there at the focus. It also has to be done in a way that brings the stakeholder voice right to the fore. This is not about creating a deal flow and then imposing that on a series of country investment strategies. It's bringing stakeholders together. I think, Francis, you put it very nicely that your key point there was like to make sure that voice is there from the beginning, that everyone is involved in that. If you're going to, as Sanjay was saying, involve communities, those communities need to be shaping their future together. So those principles have to be inclusive from the outset. And then we also need to make sure that there is a sense of urgency around this, that we're really addressing this head on as we speak now. That there isn't leakage, that we're not just investing in one country who's really stepping up and doing the right thing, simply, or disinvesting and putting that into renewables, and then investing into the country next door who's benefiting from that to then invest into new coal production. And so how do we make sure that this is being done systemically and ensuring that there isn't that leakage in that way? How do we make sure that there are innovative financing mechanisms there to allow people to shift from coal, from the economies that are built around coal? I mean, I come from Australia, and that's not a developing country in that sense, but you watch the challenges as communities deal with trying to phase that out at a national level. And so what are the innovative financing mechanisms that will ensure that you have the skills that are necessary to actually undertake the scale of these projects, the scale of transition that's going to be required for retraining entire communities in a way that they can make this transition quickly and smoothly in a just and fair way. And so it's putting that idea of financing right at the fore, because if we do not do that, then and we don't create this collective framework and this collective set of ambition standards that we adhere to and live up to the need to adhere to the following those pathways through, we will not achieve this transition. And we will definitely not achieve it in a way to address the urgency of today and in a way that is just and fair.
Okay, thanks very much, Sean. Well, just to say that I think the speakers have actually been as disciplined in terms of time as they have been engaging, which is a good thing, because it leaves us a good 20 to 25 minutes to take a Q&A and hear some responses from the people who've been listening to Manuel's talk and the panel's response. So the floor is open at the moment. I could flood the panel with questions myself, but that's not my job. I'm the moderator. Yes, please, up there, second row. There should be a microphone, I think, to come.
Thank you. My question, my name's Carrie. I work for a tech company in Silicon Valley. We're working on a virtual power purchase agreement right now on a retired coal mine where we're going to be investing in a solar farm and retraining workers as part of a just transition. But my question to you is, maybe it's what Francis brought up. What do we do in situations where there's not a one-for-one transfer? The solar farm is in another state and the coal mine is retired. What are some suggestions of ways in which, if there is no industry in a town once a coal mine is retired, what are some of the suggestions that you have for ensuring a just transition in those communities?
I think it's really tough, and I think the first thing you have to do is be honest about some of those tough situations that we'll be facing. And it's why it's even more important that we actually have plans, that we have transparency, that we have the opportunity to shape those plans, including the pace of change, the ambition of change, the alternatives. And I'm interested in that community level and that workforce level about how we smooth that transition as far as we can. And that is going to involve a lot of proper support for workers and their families and their communities and unions. This is the kind of stuff we do all the time, regardless of climate, when companies are under threat of closure or plants are in trouble. We've worked together here in the UK on kind of rapid response interventions while workers are still at work, rather than waiting for them to be unemployed, is the first point. It's simple, but my God, makes a difference. And then, it's all the way from that through to some of the macro issues that were being talked about. Again, in the UK, our welfare system has been cut to ribbons. Our investment in skills and training is rubbish, and has been for a long time. Some small improvements announced at the budget, but nothing on the scale that's needed. And of course, many people are facing benefit cuts. That makes, frankly, as a union leader, if people aren't going to get a fair deal, it is absolutely understandable why they will resist to the last the loss of a job if we cannot offer them something equivalent that provides security for people and their families. So, I do think we all have an interest. I know that we have some good examples from the ITUC around the world. We're at the early stages in many cases of what could this look like? How ambitious could we be? And actually, I think kind of Biden's administration, some of the first to really try and get to grips with some of these practical grassroots issues, which hopefully if we can create those positive stories around the world, we can start sharing them and scaling them up. But there's no getting away from the fact it's going to take investment, it's going to take repairing a lot of our social security systems, and it's going to take listening to workers and what they want.
Okay, thanks, Francis. And Manuel and Sanjay both want to come
Thank
in
you.
as well, and you might as well.
Yeah. Your question is fantastic, because the idea of this kind of panels, it is to think on concrete solutions, on concrete answers to what you are saying. It is not a one-to-one, that's true. So that is why I am used to thinking that it is more about how can we create a package that can help to address the situation that we are describing. And let me put a good example that probably nobody knows about this example because it is a very old one. As Francis mentioned, the situation of 1984 here in the UK, one of the worst, of lack of transition and lack of justice for sure. And I am wondering if there is I am all the time wondering if somebody wrote a report, something, an analysis of what happened in 1984. I would love to read it, but I am going to share with you a very old example, 1903 in Chile. You know that Chile has a official entity called Corfo. It is a public entity. It is Corporación de Fomento a la Producción, so it is a corporation to promote production. It was created in 1903, and you know why? It was the time in which the phosphates price declined in the north of Chile, in the Atacama side of Chile. So the Chileans created this entity as a way to see how to address that decline of price of the phosphates and look for some alternative for all that region of the north of Chile. And they did it great. For sure, at that time it was not because of climate. They promoted mining. No? So about sustainability, 1903, for sure, that was not the time. But they did it great. Until now, Corfo is a very effective entity. So sometimes we are thinking that we are reinventing the wheel. No, and there are good examples of a good management for that. But let me add something to my answer, because for me it is, okay, who could be in charge? What kind of body we could create to address what you are referring? But also remember that when we think about this situation towards this desired change, the point is that the regions are going to lose royalties. So it is not just about the money of a salary. Also, it is about of what it could be lost for the region, for an authority, for who knows, who is used to receive the benefit sharing of some exploitation. I am Peruvian, case of Peru, we have what it is called the canon. No, it's a royalty that it is well distributed to the regions and to the subnational government. So add to the salary the problem with the royalties. So we do need to think also how can we contribute to those regions, because for sure those are the authorities in charge of continue promoting the development of the region. So my point is that we should think on a package as a way to answer the reality that it is not one-to-one.
Okay, thanks, Sanjay.
Thanks, Jim. Very quick, two suggestions. I think one, first of all, you are moving opportunity from one town to another. Let's look at that from that perspective. And if that's the case, then there is a community that you are leaving behind, plus because it's mine, if I understood right, in one town, which is being closed, and now in the other it will be solar. I don't think company will be requiring all 100% of work population. Of course, there will be some rest will be offloaded, right? So these are the people who need to be rehabilitated and resettled. Certainly, please prepare a livelihood framework for them, how they should rehabilitate, how they should continue their. I know, justice will not be free for companies. It will cost something to them. So please be prepared. But morally, even brand-wise, you will be liked by everyone. Companies will be liked by everyone who takes justice serious into transition. Second, impart trainings to those who are being offloaded so that they can do jobs while you are imparting those who has been selected to move to other town and work on the solar plants. And then those who are being left behind, empower them, give them knowledge, information, so that they can be part of a decision-making system when transition for them is being decided.
Okay, thanks, Sanjay. Did you want to come in, Sean?
Just one thing, I just think, and you teased me about it earlier, about the multiple hats I wear, Jim, but actually at a community level, we often get caught up where we're just thinking in silos, because at the moment we're having a conversation on energy, and then there'll be another part of the world that's having a conversation on land use and farming, and these often get left out. At the community level, this has to be addressed holistically. And so this is actually looking at, right, how do we take, this is about a series of interconnected transitions happening at the same time. And actually for the community level, it's addressing that concept of an energy transition in relation to a whole series of other social, economic and environmental facing transitions that have to happen. I think that's the critical thing. Is we have to be thinking much more holistically, breaking the silos and thinking at a community level from a systems perspective, and also at a national and global level that way.
Yeah, we've got questions coming in online, but a teensy follow-up from Francis.
I failed in my core duty of explaining that the TUC, in consultation with the whole movement, has looked really carefully at where jobs are at risk, where new jobs could be created, new green good jobs, and in the parts of the country that need them most. And we've set out this £85 billion investment plan that would create over 1 million jobs, but place sensitive, community and industry sensitive. And I'll tell you what, if we had stronger rights to information, consultation and collective bargaining, that would help us get ahead of the game too.
Okay, thanks, Francis. Right, we've got some questions coming in online, I understand.
Thank you. Yes, questions from online. So we have seen how the COVID pandemic has driven more separation between the haves and have-nots. Can the panel comment on how the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities among countries should be reflected in the just transition?
Okay, well, to give other people a chance to think about it, I'm going to turn to Sanjay first of all. It seems to me this is squarely your topic.
I'll put it very, very directly. Common but differentiated responsibilities. Developing countries has raised their ambition. We saw that. Many countries have come forward. We also saw in differentiated responsibilities, developed countries have stepped back. They have not done much on finance. I think let's look at that to facilitate transition in developing countries. Will not be easy. It's a social issue as well. It's no more technical issue. It's a social issue, and that affects the vote banks of politicians in developing countries, even in developed countries also. But if we really want that, then communities cannot be left behind. Vote banks should not be disturbed, and that is one role. Common but differentiated responsibilities. All commit to phase out of coal. All commit to a fossil fuel treaty to be signed, and all commit that we will prioritize moving towards renewable energy, but then finance to come from developed countries and developing countries to go for effective implementation.
Okay, Manuel.
One additional phrase to Sanjay, to that question. So also it is about of technology transfer and capacity building. Because if we are going to switch into new technologies, but with lack of innovative technology, it will be worse. So for developing countries, that is key. The idea it is that in this time of transformation, we will need to move all together and not to leave anyone behind.
Okay, thanks, Manuel. And Francis.
I think the questioner is incredibly wise, because in my view, a root cause of the problems that we face is inequality between countries and inequality, gross inequality within countries of wealth, income and power. And that will make our job harder. And it's why I think you can't disentangle that mission for greater equality from the mission to cut carbon and net zero. And I also think it's very clear that there is a historic responsibility on countries to support developing countries do this. You know, this is another dimension to what is just, and I think a few countries need to wake up and face up to that moral and historic responsibility.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions in the room? Oh, Sanjay, quickly, yeah.
I normally say, you know, when people ask me about carbon budget, there's how to make sure that space can be vacated and all that. Now when we are in loss and damage era, let's not talk about carbon budget, let's talk about non-carbon budget through solar and wind, renewable energy that need to be occupied. Developing countries are willing to occupy. Before developed countries, finance, technology is must.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions in the room at this stage? We've got one more online.
Thank you. So again from online, I will give you a couple. So what does the panel think about a universal basic income so that necessary changes can be introduced and everyone has basic security? And also, what about repurposing stranded assets such as coal mines and closed down power plants? So going back a little bit to the just transition specifically there, I think.
Do you want to go first, Sean?
Yeah. I mean, the stranded assets conversation was very much in line with why these just and urgent energy transition principles were set up, because if countries who have invested into coal mines cannot see a clear pathway for transitioning that investment into renewable energy, or to be able to invest into the infrastructure piece of that, then it makes it very difficult. And so being able to define clearly that pathway and to de-risk those assets and to allow those people that have made those investments to be able to also invest into the new economy and to create that bridge. Otherwise, why would you disinvest in something if you haven't got something to invest into? And then it really requires a conversation. This is where blended finance is going to be so key. There's going to be a role for the role that private sector finance plays, the role that banks play in creating that deal flow, but there's also going to be a critical role that countries play in recognising that this is a transition. There is a time period, you know, where this can't just happen overnight. You can't just flick a switch and move, you know, when assets have been invested into, which maybe have a 20-year time frame. So how do you disinvest from those? And so that de-risking. You mentioned something about data, and I think part of that finance and that de-risking is really getting concrete on having the data to be able to do that de-risking, to create those pathways in a sustainable way effectively, so that it's clear to everyone, so that a collective approach can be taken. Because if everyone's working off very different sets of figures and different data, then it's very hard to create a collective approach and to de-risk that transition pathway in a way that is done collaboratively.
Okay, now go right to the other wing and
thanks,
Sanjay
Jim.
to come in.
Basic income and basic security. As of now, the basic income for communities I am talking about, that it's two times of a meal and then effort to pay their debt which they may have procured during marriage of their daughter or son or any function they may have organized. Basic security, the fact that they live in their extended family, society, village, that gives them a sense of security. But once the economy is shrinked and earning capacity will be lower, there will not be any basic income, and in terms of security they have to migrate. They'll migrate to a very hostile place. Cities are not very friendly for migrants. We saw what happened in COVID-19 lockdown. Millions moved back to their villages because nobody wanted to hire them and spend money on them, and that's the situation they all faced. So, and that basically showed how cities are hostile, selfish to accommodate them. They just want to use them, pay them on daily basis with no liability. So certainly justice need to ensure that they do not fall into that situation.
Okay, thanks. We've got, Francis, please.
Just on the basic income, I think our kind of principled position is always decent work for those who can, decent security for those who can't. And I think, we've all seen, following the austerity years in many countries, what's happened to welfare systems. I think there's quite a complicated argument and debate around basic income. I think, some people see it as a potential liberator, some people see it as creating a permanent reserve army on, ready to be brought in on 0 hours contracts or flexible contracts on low pay. So it's quite a contentious argument. But what I do know is certainly most of the people I speak to, they want decent jobs. They want to be able to earn an income and they want to be able to bargain over what is fair.
Okay, I'm going to do something bold with under 10 minutes to go. I want to throw out one question myself. We've talked rightly a lot about the coal industry and what's happened there. Certainly in the UK, the new frontier that's opening up is oil and gas. And I go to many, many meetings where the oil and gas sector is looking how its skills can be used in a low-carbon economy with things like hydrogen, carbon capture and storage. So maybe you can just throw out the session. Maybe I'll throw it to Manuel and Francis. This is transition on my right and justice on my left, as it were, if I can satirize it that way. Just to give your view on oil and gas as well and coal, and how you see that fitting into the picture.
Look, it is. I go first?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It is true that we are probably mostly focusing now in coal, but the next step, it will be oil and gas. And probably for many people, gas as a transitional gas, it could be a bit later. But let's be clear. We are in a time in which we are demanding clarity on the net zero concept, and also to have corporations joining SBTi to move into the next phase. And that could accelerate the process of gradual phasing out of fossil fuels. So we must be prepared for the next step. And let me add something, Jim, that probably we haven't talked yet about. That when you combine all that energy transformation, that it could happen sooner than later, in my point of view, and you add vulnerability and lack of adaptation, it is even worse. Let me put just a single example. I am Peruvian. The Peruvian Amazon, the main sources of income, it is a royalty for hydrocarbons. And look, the Amazon. The Amazon, it could become a savanna, as the IPCC has told us. That is the reality, the sad reality of the Amazon. And on the other hand, because of this energy transformation, could lose the incomes, the royalty incomes because of hydrocarbon. What are we planning to do with the Amazon, with that sad reality? Those are the kind of points that we must address when we think about of this gradual phasing out of fossil fuels that will occur. And that is why, last phrase, I am used to saying, friends, in Peru or in many other countries, it is not about an agreement. That is paper. That is a document. It is about a new economy. And the new economy, it is facing us with new challenges that we must start to address, or if not, it is that economy that it is going to sanction us. Nobody, not any UN agency is going to put sanctions. It is the economy. It is a new reality of a world that it is moving the rules based on climate consideration. That is, for me, a key message for our countries when we think about energy transformation and just transition.
Okay, thanks, Manuel. Francis.
Well, only to add, we know that our members in oil and gas and many other industries are talking about this all the time. They're not stupid. They can see the writing on the wall. They know where we're headed. And what they're asking for often is really practical support. They want to know where the jobs will be. They want to know what skills training they will need to do, what equivalencing qualifications there might be, whether they will have to increasingly, sadly, are they expected to pay for this themselves? Because that's the the case in many industries. There are many examples of that. And they want to help shape it. So I just, some of this is just real bread and butter stuff that we can sort, and we can come to ways that smooth that transition if people's opinions are sought and they're able to have a voice and help shape their own futures.
Okay, thanks, Francis. We're going to have to draw this to a close very quickly. Is it one short question from online?
How should ambition be reflected in Just Transitions, looking at the title?
Manuel and then Sanjay. Manuel first?
I can go first.
Yeah, sure.
I already said that. So I already said in my intervention, maybe I can repeat that once. Certainly ambition will be from countries, nation-wise. I think one of the biggest resistance we face in developing countries, even in developed countries, but developed countries more, is if we move away from existing energy infrastructure, what next? What is alternative? Especially the fossil fuel phase out, nobody is willing to commit so easily because they don't know how alternative will look like. Energy transition gives that answer, that what alternatives will look like. It's not simple installation of solar power, solar panels and wind mills. It's a complete transformation, and that will give confidence to energy planners, energy decision makers in countries, and investors also. That yes, we are willing to shift away from fossil fuel, and that will certainly add to the ambition in the countries.
Okay, thanks. Manuel, did you want to follow up?
Not too much to add. Fully agree with Sanjay. It is about a full transformation. It is not just facility by facility. So it is not that. And that full transformation means many things at the same time. It is related not only to that economic side, but the social side, the governance one, all these mechanisms to support this transformation in the most accurate and just way. I think it is a package, and that is key. And let me say, last phrase. If we are talking about ambition, we must start to live off the fossil fuel traps. We are captured by the fossil fuel trap. When we think, for example, of Peru or the Latin American countries with the oil and more with gas, it is something that we must start to discuss because we know what it could be the future. And if we are not able to discuss that now, it could be a bit later. If we started for sure, then later.
Okay, thanks. Sean?
So the ambition really is, if now, not when. This is absolutely critical, and I think the danger is that we can spend a lot of time now trying to frame out what ideal looks like, but at the same time, I think this is going to be a challenging process. It is going to be complicated and messy. If you add energy transition to land and food systems transition, which involves millions and hundreds of millions of smallholder farmers around the world and things like that as well on top of this, because these come crashing together, this gets very complicated. And so then we have to be happy to deal with that. The ambition should be that we collectively work together to really address that ambition and to really go on that journey together. And it's not going to happen by sticking to our silo or sticking to our institutional or our sort of collective agreed framework. It's got to be done jointly at scale.
I want to be relieved of my skepticism that I have in some quarters by, first of all, seeing every country draw up a just transition plan for debate and discussion, because we are far from that at the moment. So that's one basic test. But just, to kind of leave from me anyway on an optimistic note, I think it is perfectly possible to reach net zero and for working people to be better off in every sense, to have better lives, more security, fairer pay. and a stronger voice. And you know, as I say, for me, those twin goals of tackling inequality and reaching net zero go hand in hand. And the more we tackle inequality, the faster we will get to where we need to be to protect the planet too.
Excellent place to end, Francis. Thanks very much. And just to say, it's one thing if we were shifting the conversation a bit, I would have liked to have heard more about the opportunities from a just transition as well as the risks, because they are there. And I was actually hearing from an energy company last night that they actually can't recruit people with the right skills for things like offshore renewables at the moment. So both sides of the labour market, there is a demand for people's services. So we're going to have to bring it to a close there. You should say, if you're interested in following it up with this concept paper by WWF, I understand there's a box at the back into which people can drop business cards. So you're very welcome to do that. And if I can very crudely take the opportunity to do an advertisement, in half an hour's time, there will be another session on just transition in this very room organised by WWF Scotland, which will be it's called something like Beyond Energy, a just transition for all sectors and all people. So this is highly ambitious stuff, and it will be addressed by what we think to be the world's only just transition minister, Richard Lochhead. So a little bit of an advertisement there for that. But I think we really need to thank all the speakers for a very engaging discussion. And we hope to see you at other Just Transition events.
Thank you very much.